Dear colleagues, we begin our working day. We'll speak about volunteer ATO, main differences from other volunteer activities, and our speakers will have Yurydychna, head of the Committee of Protection of Association of Volunteers, and the head of the NGO Narodnyi, Dmytro Toporenko, coordinator of the Committee to Defend the Volunteers, and Yurydychna, President and Yurydychna Sotnia, head of the board of Charity for Narodnyi, Denis Smolovsky, head of the Service of Legal Assistance, and Bohdan Kovalyov, member of Volunteers, descent to and member of Volunteers of Ukraine. Good morning. First of all, thank you for visiting our press conference, which is about the Forum of Volunteers that took place last Saturday here in Ukrainian House. I would like to start with this. I would like to beg pardon from our colleagues, but the forum was called back quickly. We had just two called back in a short notice, and we were not able to invite all colleagues from all over Ukraine. Nevertheless, we had only 2 days to organize it, but we had volunteers from other regions of Ukraine, and so we should not say this is just a group of volunteers from Kiev only they are getting. Now about the issues that we discussed during the forum. Recently, we witnessed how mass media, not all, they started to attack with information against volunteer movement in Ukraine as such. Not concrete individuals, but volunteers movement and also the notion of volunteer. Because volunteers, as they were and are, that connection between our military men in the east and with peaceful and with on one hand with peaceful life on the other hand. So we decided to hold a forum and to discuss many issues, including the issue of information attacks against volunteers. In addition, we discussed the issue of security of volunteers. Legislation and amendments to the law on volunteering, and my colleagues will cover those issues in detail. So I would like to touch the first issue, the issue of information attacks on volunteers movement, against volunteers. We know that at the same time, during the last 2 weeks, in some media, mostly printed media, we will try to investigate the origins of who are owners of those printed media, but we have a feeling that all of them, they belong to a group that are under control of former party of regions, or their supporters, maybe a communist party. It's not a secret for anyone that during the last public opinion poll among people, volunteers as a phenomena, I underline, not as individuals but as a phenomena, they are on the first as to the rating of trust. So the attack against leaders of rating of trust among the society, that is very negative. Has negative and has impact on volunteers activity, but also on political situation in Ukraine. What is it about? Recently, there were articles. They started to reprint one from the other the same article with quite crying titles, yelling titles, and that is done in a way for and but they don't use any concrete fact. For example, the article sent with the title "Volunteers Stole 300 million hryvnia." Just agree, the number has forces to think. That's why we decided to invite the author of the article or owners of those publications that print such information to publish. We wanted them to speak to us as a committee and to clarify such facts, if they are. There are some negative moments as to volunteers. We were not silent about that. Quite the opposite. Since the very beginning, we are trying to those criminals who cover themselves behind the volunteers. We are trying to uncover them, and we give information about them to certain bodies. At this moment, as far as I know, there are criminal cases in criminal charges in Odessa, Kharkiv, Kyiv, in Ternopil, and if I'm not wrong, in Zaporizhia or in Dnipropetrovsk. And all those charges, we help. Our committee helps actively. As to all those criminal charges, if we put them together, the general sum of losses is on the level of $30,000. It's not 300 million. So we were very concerned when such attack against volunteers started at the same time in several publications. So that was very similar. That looked like it was an information attack, well planned and prepared. So we invite again those people who have concrete information to call our committee, contact us, and me as a head of that committee, and I promise that there is no concrete fact which will be outside of our attention. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Dmytro Toporenko. I'm the head of the committee to defend volunteers, to protect. There is a necessity in our society, since the beginning of military activities in the east of Ukraine, to help our volunteers with information. And since I had some experience working in the security service, not state-owned, I decided to coordinate some activities. You see, as my colleague mentioned, there are volunteers who are really volunteers, and in different ways they are trying. There's some people who are fake volunteers, and they are trying to get money. So we investigate every concrete case to reduce the number of stealing. Also, it's about security issue. Sometimes we have misunderstanding with law enforcement bodies, and not only with them. As a part of the committee, every case, when there is a violation, when there is an abuse of law, so we are trying to find a compromise. We have a special situation in the country. We have to pay more attention to defense capability of the country, instead of any fake information about volunteers. So that's why this committee helps to find understanding between state bodies and personal security of volunteers and unclear or fake volunteers. Thank you. Morning. My name is Dmytro Iefremov. I would like to tell you about volunteers. Volunteers are people who collect money who raise money, who raise assistance, and then they take it to ATO, to our military men who are there, who defend our motherland. Those people who stole those 300 million, if there was such a fact, those are not volunteers. Those are dealers, robbers, find the name for them, but not volunteers, because volunteers are the people who risk their life, who use their own transportation means and make it work, and many spend their time for that, and many of them lost their job, and they continue traveling to ATO and do their job. That job which is necessary now to provide assistance, to provide support to our soldiers there. So these articles and what is happening in printed media, like a persecution of volunteers, that is, we don't want that to happen. We will investigate those cases, and we've set up a working group at the community to defend volunteers, and that group is working on the investigation of such journalist, I don't know how to call that, those allegations. Because I'm responsible to tell about volunteers, what they do in ATO area, I will be happy to answer your questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Irina Layuk. I'm the president and member of the board of the NGO Legal 100. Quite recently, the amendments to the law on volunteer activity were approved, and this law gives the gives the payments to the families of those who were killed in ATO. And this is the payment to the family, which is 609,000 hryvnias, and also the payments in case of disability received in the ATO zone. We need to pay attention that if the servicemen, when they get wounds which are not related to disability, they receive assistance. The volunteers don't. Now the Cabinet of Ministers has to draft the procedures for such assistance. Also yesterday there were amendments to the law of Ukraine on the status of veterans of war passed as to this law. This is the law that has been long expected by the volunteers and by the servicemen. That is providing the status of the disabled person of the war to both the to volunteers, also providing the status of the member of the family of the one who was killed in tragic events. The most interesting privileges which this law guarantees is receiving housing, receiving the land plots. So there are some positive things in the life of volunteers. Good afternoon, Smolovsky Denis. I am the head of the service legal assistance. I would like to comment on the issues of privileged taxation for volunteers, because that influences the development of the movement. The authorities have done correctly. The volunteer activity does not fall under taxation, but one thing is to approve the norm of the law, and another thing is to correctly use it. We state that today the State Fiscal Service does not operate ideally in relation to the taxpayers, and there's the risk that this norm will be applied not adequately in relation to those who are involved in voluntary work. The direct norm of the law is commented by the State Fiscal Service. According to the State Fiscal Service, we see that the requirements to volunteers is to have all the primary documents related to the money received and to money spent. And whether this accounting is done correctly or not, on this it will depend whether this activity falls under taxation or not. But there are so many transactions related to receiving material assistance and transfer of material assistance, which means that the volunteer should have the special accounting done by some special person. But the State Fiscal Service also mentions that the statement sent by the volunteer about wrong use of funds may become the grounds for inspecting the activities of the volunteer. Let's imagine the situation when someone wants, because of some reason, wants to harm the activities of volunteers, and they can send the statement that the money is not spent correctly, and then the volunteer will have the inspection of his activities, in the result of which the volunteer movements believe that the time has come for fiscal service as well to attract the representatives of the civil society to control the activity of this body. This could be some certain volunteer council which will participate directly in considering the situations and cases related to the activities of volunteers, especially when it comes to taxation and inspections. Good afternoon, I am Kovalyov Bohdan. I am the representative of volunteer task force at the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and I will tell how I can help volunteers and how I can help Ukraine in general. I am a civil servant. I used to be the volunteer, now I am part of the Ministry of Defense, and I am the civil servant now. How can I help volunteers who are outside of the system, outside of the Ministry of Defense? First, I can communicate with volunteers, with people who care, who see some discrepancies in the army, who want to change something. And we can communicate. I can receive proposals, complaints, and react to that. If I receive adequate information, I will react to it, and you will get some feedback. A second thing I'm doing, I coordinate all the humanitarian assistance in the Ministry of Defense, this Canadian humanitarian assistance, Australians, Americans, Great Britain, Poland, Czech Republic. That is what I receive, and I participate in distributing all that, and I monitor this process, follow it up all the way down to when it comes to this soldier. Then also I participate in inspection of the training centers and test fields. They are to be inspected because if we control all these processes, we will not allow violations to take place. So talking about communication with the Ministry of Defense and with me, I can help volunteers who have some units. I can help them to find out what's needed, to receive applications from the units that need something, so that the volunteer insists that these units and commanders of the units, they should write official applications to the official logistical units, but I can just inspect whether all these applications get to where they should get, and I know cases when volunteers would force the military to write such an application. The military, they do not believe sometimes that the army can help. They have more hopes that volunteers can help, but I want to change this stereotype. We all work in order to make the state and the government do what they have to do. That is why we see some first results of the cooperation between myself and the Ministry of Defense and in the Ministry of Defense and volunteers. We are sending assistance to like one unit which is worth several million hryvnias. I sat together with the volunteers with who we were doing it all, and we calculated how long it took us to raise 2 million hryvnias to send assistance to brigade. We understand that this cooperation is important, and we need to do all that. But I understand that about 5 days ago there was some forum, and there were about 120 people present, and all of them heard that I can help, and they started calling me and writing me on a Facebook. They were writing that I am Vasya, I need 300 uniforms, 400 boots, but I would like to explain to the people who are here and to those who watch us in the internet. I'm not just helping myself, I'm just forcing the system to do what they have to do. And because I work systemically and I make the system do it, I request you to also do it in a systemic way. Do whatever you want to do, request, make people, force people to work in accordance with the system which is there in place in the armed forces of Ukraine. Work within the system, send me a photograph. For example, the photograph of an application that they send. I don't need their real application, the original. I just need a photograph to follow up where the problem is and remove this problem. And the methods are, I don't know, whatever people are saying about authorities, about the president and others, but they help me, and I have such powers and such services that remove all the obstacles. I have serious powers, and that helps us to work, to operate. And talking about humanitarian assistance, this scandalous Canadian assistance, the Russian trolls are trying to discredit it and to says all the fakes which are sent to me in Facebook or what I see in internet, in publications. We checked everything. When you start checking it, all these heroes who are selling boots or uniforms, they disappear. And that's at the level of just giving some false, fake phone numbers, fake pictures in the internet, and they are trying to create a scandal. Canadians, they do not fall for provocations, and they trust me, and we have done a lot with them. We've done a lot where people are shooting and where people are not shooting, and they believe me, not just me, but my team, because, the foreigners do trust us. It's not realistic to deceive the foreigners. They see what's happening in the country, and they select those who they can trust. There are many also questions in the Facebook about where's the Canadian humanitarian assistance. We receive a lot of humanitarian assistance, and I write on my page in the Facebook, I tell them, just read what is there. They say that there are no reports, and the volunteer task force is just has become a bureaucrat, but they are not accessible, but I am accessible. So where's the Canadian humanitarian assistance? It's 30,000 sets of uniforms and 70,000 pairs of boots. We know that we have a problem with supplies in the army, and the decision was made by the president to open the fourth way, to start fourth way of mobilization, and about 60,000 guys will become the servicemen, will start defending us. They need uniforms, and it's not always the Ministry of Defense is able to cope with that, because it's very difficult to change the system of relations between the companies, the civil servants, because you understand, before that it was all founded on kickbacks. And when we came there, when we started neutralizing some of the departments and units, we saw a very strong resistance. When they, without violating the law, they push us away. They push us away for 20, 15 days for the time frame which is needed for certain processes. The same was happening when the fourth wave of mobilization started. These people are dismissed. We would like them to be put in jail, of course, but I am really grateful to Canadians who came to help us, to assist us. I've been working with them starting from the end of November, and they ask me, what do you need, Bohdan, so that we can help you? But during the fourth wave of mobilization, we saw that we have nothing in our storages, and all the uniforms go to the front line directly from the enterprises that make these uniforms, and Canadians are helping us. And the fourth wave of mobilization was dressed into Canadian humanitarian assistance, and the footwear is distributed in ATO zone also, and we are sending all these things if you send your applications. So, okay, we will continue this discussion in the Facebook or over the phone.
Inspection in units. Here, we're in the center of MOD, and not always we know what is happening on the local level. That is broken equipment, which is in the documents is good, and storages of fuel, which was that was stealing from them for years, and also storages which, according to paper, should be filled and should be open. And also there is a big shortage there because some requests. It was decided to set up a group and now inspect clothing and products, and now there will be one person on the position who will be responsible for equipment, armored equipment, who will find who will know the status quo as to vehicles and armored vehicles. So we are on the way to that, and we are always ready to have a discussion with you. By the 13th, we will collect requests as to Brigade 93. Started with equipment, uniforms, and unclear relations with the command. There is an email, skarhatush.org in Facebook. But adequately, without emotions, we'll consider all of that, and we'll go to Brigade 93, and we'll set all of that. If there is any question, you can ask. Thank you. No questions. Ukrainian crisis media center. There was a question about taxation, probably to Denis. As far as I understand, the main problem is that inadequate of fiscal work of fiscal service. But what is the ideal tool to tax volunteers? And are you happy with the draft law, with that law which is passed? And what is the ideal variant? And the second question is to Bohdan about what is the weakest link in logistics. What is missing? Is there a problem with contractors who can do their job? The law is supporting volunteers, but how it will be implemented, that is the question. Because when we see if there is a benefit or tax benefits, there could be a risk that some shadow flows will be used in the same. We'll use that. That also can undermine those volunteers who do the work correctly. As a result, fiscal body can react aggressively against those who do their job well. If now we see the position of that body, of that agency, that maximal workflow, documents flow, is a guarantee that activity will be outside of taxation. So we understand that volunteers need 50 time of their work need to spend on documents flow. We understand that that limits the work of volunteers. So we need a correct, healthy tool how to apply that law. We don't say this should be changed. We say it should be applied correctly in the future, but for us to be sure that the public should be present as during the work of that body. In the Ministry of Defense, for example, it's very positive. Why not to use it? Apply it to those bodies that cooperate with volunteers movement. And don't forget that in addition to taxation, there is a very important addition to that. What fiscal service does, and that is the customs. And volunteer flows related to getting assistance from abroad. That is a very important point. That's why the idea itself is correct. Now, it's important to apply it correctly. And also for that, not create a risk of fiscal pressure on volunteers. Thank you. To decide on some positions, if you want to hear about promise, there could be different. One time, one enterprise is behind the other one. The other time, the other. As to department, procurement department, and all the procedures around the process of procurements of clothing for armed forces, I would emphasize that we should get rid of entrepreneurs and the producers who will work for MOD. All the necessary processes which interfere in cooperation between them and the state agency. We should give a chance to people for them to understand that there are new people have come, and we would like to prevent all those cut-offs or corruption schemes, and we should reduce bureaucracy in those processes. But from the other hand, they should be supportive and positive. And when I check all of that, sometimes, but at least they should learn how to provide quality. This is a comment for them. So we should cooperate, and we should work for the benefit of the motherland and for the benefit of those defenders in trenches. I would like to add, I communicate with businessmen who are trying to win tenders of MOD. The problem is they don't have tough conditions how to sign those conditions to supply uniforms, and they are limited as to raw materials. They needed 80,000 meters for sleeping bags, and they don't have that cloth, and there should be procedures. They should provide guarantees that they would buy it, and there should be a simplified tender procedures, and there should be a state guarantee that if people win, they will get time to make all of that, to produce all of that. Serikutnikov, Money Forum. Coordination Council of Volunteer Organizations and of Volunteers Call and Efficiency of Cooperation in Strategic Directions, like setting up working groups around important issues, important projects. 2 weeks ago, I asked from the Department of Procurements in MOD, Mr. Stenmach, during World War II, even school children were raising money, and they were buying jets, and they were collecting farms, bought tanks. We understand that it's important to provide uniforms and medicine. I called Mariupol, and the staff of defense, I told them that they need thermal visors and devices for night vision, and also sights and modern weapons. When BTR from 60s, when they get. So, as to military equipment and military, maybe it makes sense to pass a law, or there should be a decree of artists in the East and concerts not only for Mariupol, but bands, culture, word, literature, theaters, performances, all modern arts. That is needed. There is not enough of Ukrainian culture in the East and in Crimea. Let me answer. Look, I support completely. Okay, send us lethal weapons, humanitarian, and let's buy thermal visors and intercontinental missiles. That's wonderful. But you see, the problem is that we don't have people who know how to use that. And also there is a problem that people don't realize that we need to learn. We need to continue learning. So I am responsible. I'm 31 years old, and half of my life I spent to military. If we learned to use all what we have in our warehouses and even armored vehicles from 1960s, we would improve our defense capability by 10 times. I see the guys on the front line who are volunteers and like Red Sector and Duke. That's everything is wonderful. I respect them, but just patriotism and a desire to go with a pitchfork against the tanks, that's not enough. That's wrong. That's waste of human potential. Patriotism, that's wonderful, but we need to turn them into professionals. It doesn't mean that we should put them into military academies and institutions. Using internet, they can learn how to shoot. And it's too late to learn during the battle, because your mistake can cause the death of your friend, of your colleague. We need to use these resources we have to their full capability and weapons, and because our people don't know how to use bulletproof jackets correctly. So this is one point. As to thermal visors and etc. I don't want to speak about anything negative here, but there should be some kind of positive attitude, and we know about the honesty. We know about facts when volunteers assistance that comes back from those military men to whom we have. That's why I insist on systemic approach. You buy a thermal visor, just register it somewhere, otherwise it will get into wrong hands. And those wrong hands will use it for hunting in the forest after the war. So we can receive humanitarian assistance for loan. We could send money without registration, etc. But it scares me that goes into a black hole. Let's work systemically. Let's use the system. I'm ready to communicate, and I'm ready to provide all assistance. And the services ask. Even if we don't register, they say, where did you give something for us to check? And they say, Bohdan, give us information about Brigade 79. We'll check and who sent them what and how that is used. Good idea, yes. Let's work. Thank you.
About interaction, the Association of People's Volunteers unites up to 26 legal entities, the charity foundations and the civic organizations. We have a coordination council. The next level is committees, and committees are on security, on medicine, and so on. All the committees are working with the sectoral ministries. The Committee of Protection of Volunteers, we cooperate with the Security Service, Ministry of Defense, Ministry of the Interior, all those ministries which have information on our issues. or that can answer our questions. We have meetings with MPs, we accumulate information, and we are involved in legislative drafting. To your third question, we have some groups, folk groups, which perform in the hospitals. They cannot go to the zone of warfare because that's dangerous, and we go to places of dislocation. But the checkpoint is a place which where we cannot take anyone. Not everyone should go there. Thank you for your question. The time is over, but the journalists may ask questions to our participants after the brief.